I don't have a clever YouTuber intro, and you're not here for the pleasantries anyways. What I have here is a t-shirt sleeve that I've cut off and removed the seams from. I just cut them off too. I didn't seam rip them or anything. This is just, it's a stretchy polyester knit, so it doesn't want to seam rip, it just wants to rip. So just cut it off, it's way easier, and it doesn't impact the amount of fabric you use anyways, especially if you're using a t-shirt that fits you or is slightly bigger than you, because you can get 4 artists, gloves or smudge sleeves or whatever you want to call these things, out of 2 sleeves in total, you know? So you just fold it in half and then cut it in half, because we're going to be cutting it into quarters essentially. Because when you use a t-shirt that fits you or is slightly bigger than you, it's pre-measured to your wrist already because it fits you in the shoulder. So you don't have to measure jack. I mean, I'll show you a little bit later the measurements anyways, but you don't have to measure this if you're using a t-shirt that fits you. But now that you have it in 2 pieces, 2 perfect halves, lovely, you're going to fold those halves each in half themselves and clean up the edges by cutting off this little pie slice right there, and then also cutting off the pie slice that curves around the bottom edge. You'll see what I mean here in a second. But by cutting those off, you're making a perfect kind of rectangle that is the circumference of your wrist. And we're not going to be cutting this piece in half. We're just, folding it in half because, 3D modeling and measuring and going from a 2D surface to a 3D surface is hard. Just cut off both odd pie slice pieces, and there you have your no measure base for your artist glove. So one more time I'm going to show you, since I make 2 at a time. I'm just going to line it up here. I line up the top corners there with using that top cup, the edge of the sleeve seam thing. I don't cut that off, I just use it to, it doesn't get in the way or anything. It's just a nice point to start off from. But here we go. That's 1 pie slice right there. And then the other pie slice kind of folds around the bottom there, and you're going to just use your scissors to keep as much fabric as you can that's all the same length. So I just line it up so that way I can cut straight across and come to that little corner in the fabric right there. That's where my glove, that's going to determine the length of my glove, is where that corner ends, unless I have a second piece of pie. And now you fold it inside out, or well, it's not sewn together yet, so you just fold it so that way you see what would have been the inside of the t-shirt sleeve. And because this is the side we're going to sew on, that way when you turn it inside out, you don't see it. And you don't have to use thread that matches, theoretically, for this either, because you won't see it. But here, I'm going to show you my my little measurements for my wrist here, because you really only need it to fit in 2 places. And the first one is right through here. You use that measurement, not this one, because you're cutting a hole for your thumb to slide through, so it doesn't actually need to fit through here. It doesn't need to flare out like a glove properly would with fingers and stuff. It doesn't need to have 9 inches in length. It only needs about 7.5 maybe. And then here's the other area the glove really needs to fit. Because again, you're cutting out a small portion of the fabric for your thumb to slide through, so that way it doesn't have to fit properly. And if you see here, my fabric is roughly in the golden range there of fitting around my wrist, because it's over 7.5. Because it's over 7.5, it's, when I sew it together, it's going to be fairly close to my wrist size. Obviously, if you want it tighter, you can, make adjustments for your personal style or comfort levels, but you don't really need to stress out too much in terms of measuring, so long as you're using a t-shirt that relatively fits you. So here I am just using little clips to hold the fabric in place, that way I can sew it. If you don't have little clips, you can use binder clips, or if you bought a pack of needles, sewing needles that have other needles that you don't know what they mean or anything, you can use that too. I mean, you don't need to use the proper tools, so to speak, for every project, especially if you're just making something super simple and fast like this, because it's not meant to be a beautiful looking piece. For thread, because I don't like tying a knot in the end of the thread, I like to pull it out to the length of my arm-ish. I don't stretch it taut, I just roughly go to that length, and then I fold it in half and match up the ends of the thread together and thread both ends through the eye of the needle, so that way I have this nice loop to work with. And I will be showing you again a second time later, so don't fret too much if you missed it. But you just put both ends through the eye of the needle together, and you have your tails, and then you have a loop on the other end. This loop you're going to use instead of tying a knot, because knots are hard to tie and thread. And I'm staying really close to the edge of the fabric here, but obviously if you want to have more room to work with, you can do something, you can sew in closer. And if you watched, I just passed the needle through the loop, so I have a beginning stitch with loop, and it looks like a beginning stitch on both sides of the project. And now I'm passing the needle above where I want to put the next stitch, because I'm doing what is called a back stitch. A back stitch is a very strong hand stitching technique that just about everybody should learn how to do, just because it's very useful in most situations. You don't have to be particularly good at sewing or anything to use the stitch well, or whatever. I mean, just it's very useful in a pinch, essentially. And I will probably link the video I learned how to do the back stitch from, or that I think explains it really well, in the description, because I'm not really qualified to teach you how to do the back stitch properly, but I will get kind of close to the camera here so you can kind of see what I'm doing. I am going into the fabric and then putting the needle through above where I want to go back into the fabric, and it's going to make it look really pretty on one side and then really odd on the other side of the fabric, but it's how you do the back stitch, and you really only need to work on one side of the fabric at a time to do this. It's fairly fast, but most importantly, it's strong. It was used all throughout history to do just about anything, just about everything. And for a project this size, it is a decent speed. Take it at a pace you're comfortable with. I do speed up the video here in a little bit, just so that way the video is not super long and you're not watching me do the same stitch a million times. Well, what feels like a million times. But it is what it is. It's a good stitch, and most importantly, it's machine washable. It holds up fairly well to most washing machines, so it doesn't have to, you don't have to make a new one every single time you wash it, and you don't have to put it in with your deli kits or have a specific load of washing to do just for these things, you can just throw it in the wash with your socks and call it a day. Because nobody's got time for carefully and meticulously taking care of every little tiny thing in their life. If you do have time for that, I highly doubt that you do. I think you're a liar. Yeah. Here's where I've sped up the video a little bit, and you can kind of just see how you do the back stitch properly, I guess. Again, I'm staying fairly close to the edge of the fabric here because I'm using a t-shirt that properly fits me, and I'm decent at sewing that close to the edge of the fabric. But if you want more room, you can leave yourself more room on the fabric. But keep in mind, this is a stretchy knit polyester thing, so you can go in further into the fabric to sew your line and be just fine. You're not gonna get like it'll be a little bit, you'll have to stretch out your glove a little bit to get it on each time, but it will still fit even if you do that, because it's a stretchy fabric. That's the whole point of a stretchy fabric, is to be comfortable like that. And here we're getting close to the end of the fabric. I don't go over the ends, I start just inside and end just inside them, in the corners there. And as you can see, my length of thread wasn't quite long enough to comfortably tie a knot here, so you'll see me struggle with it a little bit, but it's not impossible. See, my thread just fell out of my needle, and you can see me failing with it, but there is two ways you can end your length of thread here. You can either put it back on the needle or leave it on the needle if you had a proper amount of thread, and just tie a knot that way, using the needle as like a way to manipulate the thread. Or you could just do what I end up doing here, which is I tie a little loop knot or whatever it's called just in the end of the fabric and try to keep it close to the fabric itself. The thread, I tie it in the thread. I don't tie a knot in the fabric. I tie a knot in the thread and I keep it close to the fabric, but it's not perfect. But because it's two ends of a thread, it's thicker and won't pass back through or come undone, even in the wash. It works just fine. I trim my ends, and then you'll see I flip it back inside out so that way I can get an idea for where to put the thumb hole. Now, for anybody who's just doing this to be either hand or whatever, you don't have to do what I'm doing here necessarily. You could just keep it folded in half, try it on, get it lined up where you want it. Keep that top edge seam that we didn't cut off from the sleeve, and have that going across your palm and around the back. And then just pick out where, how far down you want your hole to start. And you really only need about an inch, inch and a half, maybe 2 inches. And you just keep it folded in half and you cut a little sliver of fabric away. I like to embroider the back of my little artist gloves, as you can see by the one I'm wearing. So I don't tend to keep it perfectly, folded in half and then sewn across. I have designated gloves for each hand, but that's the one for my right hand. And yeah, that's it. That's all you gotta do. It's super easy. It's finished. That's it. One seam, a little more cutting than sewing, and you call it a day. So, but just in case you missed it, here I am, gonna do it again. Got my thread, this time a little bit longer, matching up my ends, keeping it nice and untangled, give it a little lick to pass through the needle easily, putting it on the needle, threading it through. There's my loop and the tails of my thread. Now I'm starting in the corner of the fabric, go through to the other side, and then I come back to the side that I was just on, that's facing me. I pass the needle through the loop, and then I pull it tight. I don't crush the fabric, I just pull it tight. Then I move up a little bit and pass the needle through, flip it over, and now this is the side that I'll be working on the project from here. And then I just continue with the back stitch, because to complete a stitch in the back stitch, you have to move the needle back to where you had just, exited the fabric. You can kind of see that here, but yes, that's just the back stitch. How you do it is, again, really easy, really quick if you're doing a project of minimal size like this. Altogether, both of these took maybe 25 minutes to do, and that's with me fumbling around and recording it and whatnot, just basically screwing around and pretending that I know what I'm doing. It's a very easy way to make a smudge sleeve or an artist's glove or whatever you call these things. They work for both traditional art and digital art, or machine washable. Well, I should say that they're not perfect for digital art, because, if you're drawing on a tablet or whatever, it's designed to pick up on the stylus or your finger, but having the glove on does help, because it's better than nothing. You're not getting nearly as much excess just drawing from having your hand sitting on the tablet. But it does work. I use it all the time. I use these things all the time, and I make a ton of them when I feel I need them. That way I have a good supply as I work on projects. That way, if I'm doing just a pencil piece, I can change out my glove as it gets too dirty and is dragging graphite all over the paper instead of just where I want it. And it's just nice to have extras for when you're washing some and when you're waiting for the laundry to get done, you have something you can use to work with for the project you're doing while you fold laundry or whatever, or wait for the laundry. And then here we go. Here's that knot again. Just tie that knot in the end. And I used the needle this time to manipulate the thread. Yeah, it's just more comfortable to do it that way. Yeah, you can see here, I try it on this hand, again, because it's the hand that doesn't have a glove on already. And it's mostly so I can get an idea of how low to put the hole, essentially. And then, yeah. I don't know, I'm running out of things to say, as you can see. I'm doing this all in one take. I'm not spending 8 hours editing this or trying to figure out how to edit this, because it's just a short video, short project, short little thing. It's supposed to be an easy thing, and it is, for the most part, but you run out of things to say when it comes to easy stuff. It's not terribly exciting. Yeah, now I have extra artist gloves to work with. And you can see here I'm doing the little pulling the unfinished edges of the glove, just stretching it out a little bit, that way it doesn't come unraveled, because it's going to do that anyways. It's going to curl up like that as you wash it and use it. But just doing it prematurely like this is going to give you a better manipulation of how it lays, rather than if you had just thrown it in the wash and let it decide how the edges end up. Just be careful when you're pulling though, you don't want to tear it. Like I said, cheap t-shirt fabric is pretty stretchy and flimsy, and unfinished edges tend to rip. But thank you all so much for watching, and this is my barely edited one-take go. Have a nice day, and I will see y'all next time.